Let's dive into today's mailbag, where we'll tackle your questions from our Thursday live show. First up is Archangel, asking about Tyler Allgeier. What's the latest on him and who might be interested? Well, a lot of teams could be eyeing Allgeier. He rushed for over 1,000 yards in his rookie season, proving he can be a solid RB2 or even a starting running back for many teams. However, I don't expect any serious interest until after the draft. This year's running back class is loaded, so teams might prefer to wait and see if they can snag a younger, cheaper option rather than trade for Allgeier. Think of it like the situation with DeAndre Swift when he was traded from the Lions to the Eagles after the draft. The Lions picked a running back and suddenly they were looking to deal. That's a similar timeline we might see for Allgeier. Next, we have Anthony with a super chat asking whether the Falcons should keep Kyle Pitts or trade him for picks. This is a hot topic. Personally, I believe it's in the team's best interest to trade him if they don't plan to use him effectively. Based on how he was utilized at the end of last season, it's hard to justify his $10 million cap hit for this year, especially since he was playing less than 50% of the snaps. If the Falcons plan to use him more effectively with their new quarterback, then keeping him makes sense. But if not, what's the point? I'd be pretty upset if we get to the season and see him being outsnapped by someone like Charlie Warner in the red zone. We've seen mid-draft trades happen before, like when A.J. Brown was dealt. If a team really wants a tight end and misses out on one, they might come calling for Pitts. Moving on, Vincent Cutts brings up the possibility of Kirk Cousins starting for the Falcons in 2025. This would likely require a significant injury to Michael Penix or a major drop in performance. If Penix plays well, there's no way they're benching him in his first real year as a starter. However, if Cousins is still on the team in 2025, I could see a couple of scenarios playing out. They might keep him at home and look to trade him mid-season if a team's starter gets hurt. Alternatively, Cousins could step in for an injured Penix and perform well, leaving the Falcons with a tough decision. Now, Lav S asks which players are must-grabs if they fall to pick 15, even if the Falcons plan to trade down. I think Atlanta might be interested in trading back from that spot, but if they stay at 15, there are a few players I'd love to see them grab. I don't expect them to go for an offensive lineman right now, but if they were looking for a new blindside tackle to replace Caleb McGarry, someone like Armin Miu from Missouri could be a solid option. However, that might be a move for next year. If we're talking about players who could fall to 15, I'm really high on Will Johnson from Michigan, Jalen Carter from Georgia, and Mike Green. Those three would be my top picks. Lastly, Jeremy asks if Arthur Blank should fire Terry Fontenot if they can't trade Cousins and ultimately have to release him. I don't think so. Blank is likely on board with the plan to see if Cousins can find a new home. They might drag this out into the season, waiting for a team with an injured starter to come calling, which could significantly increase Cousins' value. I believe Blank is aware of the strategy and wouldn't be blindsided by a decision to cut Cousins after spending $10 million on him. If they had cut him back in March, they could have saved that money, but now they're playing the long game. Thanks for all the great questions, everyone. Let's keep the conversation going. Let's dive into some important discussions about NFL players and the Falcons. First off, when it comes to Kirk Cousins and his earnings, yes, he earned that money. He didn't manipulate anyone to get an extra zero on his contract. The question is whether his performance justifies the $380 million he's made. If you look at wins per million, it might not add up, but he was a free agent at the right time, and a team needed a quarterback. He showed enough during his previous contract to warrant the next one. Now, let's talk about the possibility of the Falcons drafting an edge rusher in the first round. If they do, who should they consider? I'd rank my preferences as follows: Mike Green, Michael Williams, and J.J. Pierce. There are a couple of concerns with Green, mainly about the level of competition he faced at Troy and some off-field issues. The Falcons will need to do their homework to see if they're comfortable with him. Michael Williams had a less productive year due to an ankle injury, but he played on a stacked Georgia defense, making it hard to stand out. As for J.J. Pierce, he has some temper issues in the locker room and relies heavily on speed. While speed is great, I prefer a player who can win with power. Speed can often be countered by better offensive tackles, but power is something that can dominate. Before we move on to more questions, I want to highlight the Falcons' draft hat this year. It's a pretty cool design, and if you're interested, check it out in the comments and description of this video. Now, Aiden Stackhouse sent in a kind message, and I appreciate the support. Thank you, Aiden. Next up, we have a question about David Onyemata. Will he be traded or cut this season? I don't think so. Atlanta has made a decision between Onyemata and Grady Jarrett, and they're sticking with Onyemata. If you look at last year's performance, Onyemata actually played better than Jarrett when you strip away the emotional ties of moving on from a player who had been with the team for a decade. I believe Onyemata will continue to serve as the team's nose tackle. Cade asks which player drafted last year, aside from Michael Penix, will take the biggest step forward. If we go in order of the draft, we have Rook in round 2, Braylon in round 3, Brandon in round 4, and then Casey Washington and Zion Logue. Zion Logue is no longer with the team, as he's now with the Bills. Jace McClendon could see a bigger role in his third year, especially with Tyler Allgeier ahead of him, but I wasn't too excited about that pick initially since he didn't add much to the running back room. That leaves us with Casey Washington, who had a solid preseason. I remember when Penix came in against the Broncos and made a great throw to Washington, even though he got a concussion on the play. Then there's Dorian, who I'm not too high on. So we're left with Rook and Trice. Rook battled through an ankle injury last season and was a healthy scratch for the first third of the year. With Grady Jarrett out of the picture, Rook is set for a bigger opportunity, so I'm going to go with him as he works his way back to full strength after his ACL injury. Now, Damon raises a point about the offseason. If something significant doesn't happen before September, could this offseason be seen as a failure? Raheem Morris would likely disagree. He was asked about the defense's struggles last year and the lack of significant moves. I think it's fair to consider the draft when evaluating Atlanta's offseason. We haven't reached that point yet, but it's hard to ignore that the pass rush ranked 31st last year, and the solution was to sign a player over 30 who had 8.5 sacks last season. It's not a terrible move, but it's not exactly a game-changer either. Let's talk about the Falcons and their offseason moves. While I would have liked to see a bit more action, the reality is that there haven't been many great opportunities to upgrade the pass rush. I don't think the Falcons missed out on a bunch of bargain deals. They just didn't find the right fit. For example, I'm not upset they passed on giving Josh Sweat $21 million. He's been one of the more inconsistent players at his position, so I can't say it was a huge mistake to let that one go. Honestly, I don't think there was a standout pass rusher available this offseason that would have made a significant difference. Now, let's move on to Drake London. Damon asked for a bold prediction for his stats in the 2025 season with Michael Penix at quarterback. Last year, I predicted London would finish with around 1,200 yards and 8 touchdowns, and he ended up with 1,200 yards and 9 touchdowns. So I was pretty spot on. This year, I'll say he'll grab about 105 receptions, rack up 1,200 yards, and score 10 touchdowns. That sounds about right. Next, Jason Greenway asked if we might address the center position in the 4th round. I think the center situation has already been addressed with Ryan Newsel stepping in for Drew Dalman. Newsel played a significant role last season when Dalman was sidelined with an ankle injury. Given the limited draft capital, I don't see center being a priority this year. They might roll the dice with Newsel and look for a late-round option, but I doubt they'll reach for a center in the 4th round, especially since it's a weak class. Tony Wright brought up an interesting trade scenario where Jacksonville gets Atlanta's first-round pick, and in return, Atlanta receives Trayvon Walker and Jacksonville's second-round pick. This trade would give Jacksonville 2 first-rounders at picks 5 and 15. If we break it down, you're essentially valuing Trayvon Walker between the 36th and 15th picks. According to the trade value chart, Walker would be worth around the 39th overall pick. The trade value chart assigns a numerical value to every draft pick. So if you want to trade up to the Falcons' 15th pick, it would cost you 1,500 draft points. You'd need to combine picks to reach that number for a fair trade. If you take the 1,500 points for pick 15 and subtract the 540 points for Jacksonville's 36th pick, you're looking at something around the Bears' pick at 39. I don't think the Jaguars would value Walker that low. They'd likely want more. So while Jacksonville gets 2 first-rounders, I don't think that's enough for them to part with Walker. Now, Tony Taylor mentioned a potential trade where the Browns acquire Atlanta's first-round pick in exchange for a second, a third, and a fourth. This would mean the Browns get pick number 15, while Atlanta would receive pick 33, the first pick in round 2, the third pick in round 3, and the first pick in round 4. That's an intriguing deal, and I'm all for exploring options that could benefit the Falcons. Finally, Archangel asked about some sleepers in the first and second rounds. On the offensive side, I'm looking at Jaden Higgins from Iowa State. He's got impressive size, tested well, and produced despite being part of a lackluster offense. On the defensive side, I'll mention Darian Porter, a 6'3" cornerback, which is a rare find. But I also want to highlight Omar Norman-Lott, a defensive tackle from Tennessee. He's one of the best pass-rushing defensive tackles we've seen in recent drafts. The catch? He's a bit smaller and doesn't play enough snaps to justify a first-round pick. If you're investing in a first-rounder, you want someone who's going to be on the field consistently. Norman-Lott is more of a rotational player and a specialist in passing situations, but when he's on the field, he can wreak havoc in the middle of the line. To wrap up today's episode, if you're still with me, drop an ATL in the comments. I love seeing the loyal fans who stick around until the end. So go ahead, roll on down, and let's see those ATLs.